Hello, welcome. I'm here at 1770 on the beach in the beautiful sunshine, but it's windy as heck. So I've retreated to the car. I'm here at 1770 on the beach in the beautiful sunshine, but it's no. Okay, that's not great. Sorry, I had myself repeating to myself because I was playing it in my control room so I could talk to you on the chat. Okay, I'm still not 100% with this technology. I'm hoping if I leave that on pause, then I can still talk to you on the chat because I couldn't get the chat to work somewhere else. So anyway, the sound is good. Thank you, Dale. That is good to know. And what about you, Michelle? Can you hear me? Because you said that you didn't have any sound. So just let me know. I hope you can. And if you can't, and if you're having any trouble with the connection, then you can always go and watch the replay, and it will be certainly on my YouTube channel moments after we finish, and I will get it up onto the website at kandooequine.com/webinars by the end of the day anyway, or probably sooner. And Kaylee's here. Good. Hi. You're okay too. Good. Excellent. And you can hear me. That's fine. So good. Now, today we're talking about starting your horse under saddle. And the big thing, the big problem I have, or a lot of people have, is the timing of this. What age should we start our horses? And it really is a big issue. And I think it's probably one of the things, or probably the main thing, that goes wrong with people when they start their horses, because it seems like it should be a really simple thing, but it's not. And we have all these misconceptions about when is the correct time to start a horse. Dale is off betting on the racehorses this morning our time. Of course, it's your evening time, isn't it, Dale? Anyway, he's in the States and he's putting a bet on the horses. Now, racehorses, particularly the thoroughbred ones, but the standardbred ones are pretty bad too. They start them really, really young. I remember going once, somebody was advertising for someone to start some racehorses, and I thought, oh, this is really nice. They want to do it a bit differently. Because they'd asked me to apply for the job. So I thought, oh, this is great. That's about 10 years ago. And I said, oh, maybe they're coming around to the idea that you should actually educate these horses a little bit before they go tearing around the track. So I went off for this interview, and I was promptly asked to ride this horse that wasn't yet 2. She was apparently going off to be a racehorse, a 2-year-old, to start as a 2-year-old. So she wasn't even 2. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. And it is astonishing what these young horses go through. And I think that I'm just going to read you something from Dr. Deb Bennett. And she wrote this in 2005, and she said, there is no such thing as early maturing or slow maturing breed of horse. Let me repeat that. No horse on earth of any breed at any time is or has ever been mature before the age of 6, plus or minus 6 months. So, for example, the quarter horse is not an early maturing breed, and neither is the Arabian a slow maturing breed. As far as their skeletons go, they are all the same. This information comes, I know, as a shock to many people who think starting their colt or filly under saddle at the age of 2 is what they ought to be doing. And it is, such a common misconception that we believe these horses, to be early maturing or late maturing, or whatever it is. The fact is that they're not mature until sort of 5.5 at the earliest. So I think that tells you about how they're physically mature. The other thing I find is a problem is their emotional and mental maturity, and whether or not they're up to dealing with all of that information. And I think they're not. I mean, from what I see, and I've been basically just starting horses for almost 2 decades now, has been what I've been doing, and all breeds, because I've been taking horses in for starting, all breeds, and it is amazing. The later you start them, the easier it is. Now, I mean, from starting, I mean getting actually under saddle. There's a lot you can do with the horse before then, but because it's still emotionally immature, you do have to be careful how you approach that. And so what I want to do today is talk you through some of those things. So let's just look really quickly at Deb Bennett's rather lovely picture, which is this one. This picture here shows you when all of the bone growth plates close up. So, you know, it really is the last ones to close up are along the back, and that's where we're going to sit. So it's very important that you get this right. You know, the legs do close up first, but still you can see, you know, not until sort of 3 years of age. And this is the problem why we're racing these young horses. They're so young, and we're doing so much damage to them as we do that. And it really is such a shame. I think the thing that I find even worse than that, or maybe not as bad, but just equally bad, is the emotional maturity problem with these young horses. And so we're going to talk today about lots of things you can do before you actually back your horse, before you get on the horse. But it is also important that we bear in mind that the horse is still emotionally very young. And so we need to tailor the training to accommodate that. Now, an educationally young horse is just a horse. It can be any age. So you can have an educationally young 5-year-old horse, a horse that's just been in the paddock for the first 5 years of its life. Now, it's not going to be able to handle an hour's lesson, and we're just going to put the riding aside for a moment. It's not going to be able to handle an hour's lesson, anything that involves it using its brain and staying engaged with learning. So it's very important that we tailor lessons to the educational level of the horse. But there are lots and lots of things that we can do earlier. So what I want to do now is just take you into the Kandoo equine training. Oops. And we'll go through what we can do with the horses and where we should start with these youngsters. Right, so here we are on the webinar page. I'm just going to go to my courses, and we'll just get you into the horse training course. Right. Okay, so let's say you've got a 2-year-old horse, and obviously you don't want to start it under saddle. And so what we're going to do is really start with the very first thing, which is the engagement zone. You can go there with your 2-year-old horse, and you can find out all about its emotional level and how you're going to train it, how the training is going to progress for your horse, and how your horse learns. That's a great course to start with your youngster. The next thing to do is to go to give to the bit. Now, before you put a bridle on the horse, you really should have the horse seen by the dentist. And I think it's very important that you do that, just to make sure that your horse is ready to wear a bridle, hasn't got any problems with the teeth there that could be problematic and that could cause the horse any pain. So do that, and then you can work through all of these lessons with the bridling with your young horse. And you don't have to get on for any of this. These can all be done on the ground first. And as you can see, you know, we don't even think about riding that right until the 11th lesson there. So it is much easier for the horse to learn all of these things from the ground. So after you've done that, give to the bit work. And what that'll give you is it'll give you the horse that's in that engagement zone bubble of communication. So you can see the black horse here. You know, she's round and she's soft and she's listening. And this is what you get from give to the bit. Now, it might not look like something you want. And a lot of people look at that picture and say, oh, I don't need that because, you know, my horse is not going to do dressage. It's a trail riding horse, or it's a Western pleasure horse, or whatever it is. And I don't need that frame. But I think the thing is that it's not about the frame. This is about safety first. This is about getting the horse to pay attention, getting the horse in your bubble of communication, and having the horse soft and responsive. The advantage of the frame is that it helps the horse build this top line muscle. Just by having the horse round up, it allows her to elevate her shoulder and to build up this top line muscle, because what happens naturally with the horse is the horse naturally carries 60% of its weight here on its shoulder, 60% of its weight naturally here, and just 40% of its weight on the hindquarter. Now, we then go and compound that problem by sitting on the horse on its shoulder. And then we say, okay, horse, now what I want you to do is I want you to collect, and I want you to put your hindquarter underneath you more so that you can jump the jump, or you can collect in the canter, or you can do a pirouette, or you can do a haunch turn, whatever it is. What we want you to do now is want you to elevate your shoulder and put your hindquarter underneath you. And the horse goes, well, I can't do that because you're sitting on my shoulder and I'm carrying all my weight on my shoulder. So it's very important that we build that top line before we get on the horse and ask it to perform. So the next place to go then will be the shoulder control. Now, the shoulder control teaches you how to get the horse to do what we call reverse arc. So it means with the give to the bit, we taught the horse to follow its nose. So if we bend the horse a little bit to the left and then their feet follow the nose, the horse travels around to the left. With reverse arc, we want to be able to bend the horse to the left, but have its left front step in front of its right front. So it's going to be traveling to the right when it's bent to the left. And that's really important, because what that does is that helps us get the horse, allow the horse to elevate its shoulder, because the horse has to elevate its shoulder in order to do that reverse arc, because otherwise its left front is just going to bang into its right front. And there's a video here and this one, you know, in particular will show you how to get that done with your young horse that isn't under saddle. So all of these lessons here, you can see these are all on the ground. This whole first page is all on the ground. You can do this a year, 2 years before you ride your horse, except for those first two. So there's so much work with the shoulder control that you can do on the ground before you ride your horse. And it's great to get that done, to have that sort of control already there. I want to go from there. We can do these as well. So teaching hips to the fence is a great thing to do, because it doesn't just line your horse up to the mounting block for mounting. Of course it does that. That is what it's all about. But what it also does is it's a really good example of your horse's emotional level. It's a very simple lesson. So, you know, your spot, direction, motivator, reward is very clear. So it's easy to see if the horse is doing it correctly. And it's easy for you to know how much pressure your horse requires to do that. But it's also really a great lesson for the horse about pressure release, because for the young, uneducated horse, learning about pressure release like this is really good. And have a quick look at this horse's emotional level. He's a very sensitive horse, and you can see here we have Romeo, and this is another lesson to get him ready for mounting. He hasn't been sat on yet at all, and he obviously knows the hips to the fence to get to the mounting block. So once he's there, I just want to make sure that he's completely comfortable standing there. So you can see I'm fixing my camera, I'm doing all sorts of things. He's just standing there. So he really gets that that's all he has to do in this position. He doesn't have to move at all. And I want him to really understand that well before I actually get on. He's been a very nervous horse and, you know, quite sort of touchy. So I'm trying hard to make sure that he's not feeling nervous when I do finally get on. So I'm not going to bang around in the saddle, but I'm going to, you know, have enough movement to make him understand that. So as you can see, you know, Romeo here is learning that his job is just to stand there. Now, he's not only getting that lesson, he's also getting the idea that I am higher than him. So that's a great lesson for horses long before you ever mount. You can teach them that lesson early on and get them really habituated to having you higher than them. Now, before we go much further, you're going to need the horse to be able to wear a girth. Now, a lot of horses, you know, have sort of worn maybe a rug with a girth or things like that. And people have a bit of a tendency to overlook this important lesson because of that. And I think it's a mistake. I think it is very important that you habituate your horse properly to a girth. Again, this can be done, you know, really as soon as your horse is wearing a bridle. And the reason I say as soon as the horse is wearing a bridle is that I have done some work looking at the difference between the amount of pressure you require to use a head collar to teach your horse things like give to the bit or give to pressure. And you need a lot more. So you know, where possible, unless you've got a really exceptional reason for not wanting to use a bridle, if your horse can't use a bridle, then that's absolutely fine. But I find that you need a lot less pressure, and it's a lot nicer for the horse to learn these things with the bridle, with a nice simple snaffle. And if you have good control of your pressure release, which is what it's all about, you're not going to disadvantage the horse at all by using a bridle early on. So there's lots and lots of things you can do with this saddle habituation. And even if you've got a horse that perhaps is a bit cold-backed, what it usually means is that it's been missing these saddle habituation lessons, and the saddle has just been thrown on the horse rather than the horse being taken through these lessons step by step. So it's important that you come back, I think, and do these first saddling lessons, especially with those habituation lessons. They're very good for any horse that's a little unsure about the saddle or things flapping about. In this module also, you'll see this 3-part saddle fitting course. And I think it's very, very important. I mean, I think it probably is the most important thing when you do start your horse, is that the saddle fits. And it's just a real deal breaker if you cause your horse pain. Even the first time you sit on the horse, if you're teaching hips to the fence and you do the first mounting in this lesson here, and you're teaching hips to the fence, and you get on the horse and that saddle pinches the horse's wither, the horse will probably leave. And it'll be a nasty experience for that horse, and something that may well stay with that horse for a long time to come. It's completely unfair on the horse to ride a young horse or train a young horse in a saddle that hasn't been properly fitted to that horse. Now that course, the 3-part saddle fitting inside first saddling there, it's not a saddle fitting course. It's enough information from a professional saddle fitter to allow you to look at your saddle on your horse and know whether or not it fits. What points do I look at? Where do I need to look? And so I think that is absolutely essential. So from there, once you've got a saddle that fits, you can go straight into long reining. Now, this is one of my favorite things because it's so useful. It's like lunging in that the horse goes around us, but because we've got 2 reins, one in each hand, the horse, we can see and feel the horse. So we can see if the horse is soft, and we can feel whether the horse is light in the bridle. We can see whether the horse is in frame or not. And for me, it's really doubly useful because what we're doing here, because the horse is traveling in frame, you can see that horse's frame. His nose is in front of the vertical, he's round, he's soft, he's lifting his shoulders, he's using his back, he's building top line muscle. He's building all those muscles that he's going to need to carry us. And that's what's so important, because we don't want to get on a horse without any top line muscle, because again, it's a deal breaker. It's going to be very uncomfortable for the horse. And so what you want to do is you want to get a saddle that has been fitted to the horse before you get on, and you want to be getting on a horse that already has the top line muscle to carry you. So the long reining course, again, of course, it is all on the ground. This is all things you can do as soon as your horse is bridled and has done the give to the bit work. You can even do this before the shoulder work if you like. It's not as simple as lunging. The truth is, it just isn't as simple. It is more complicated, which is why I go into a lot of detail for you about how to manage. So horses that kick at the lines, for example, this is, it is a big problem. So we need really to make sure that your horse has been habituated properly to the lines, and you'll get all of that in these lessons here. Now, for me, short reining is a useful little thing, but I find it more useful when the horse is already started. So if you're starting your horse, do teach this. It's like long reining, only shorter. It's like long reining, but we're very close to the horse. So it's quite nice. It's easier for the horse because we are close. And it's also a great place to just sort of get those walk trot transitions, because when you do ride, you're going to want the horse to move from walk to trot. And so rather than having to use your leg or anything, it'd be good if the horse can listen to a verbal cue. And so this is a great place to get those verbal cues. So there's upward and downward transitions. So the first time you do ride, the horse already knows that. So it's a very useful little lesson for when you're getting close to riding your horse. So that's short lining. Next thing you want to do is go over the page, because I don't, whoop, yeah. And now we're going to come to all those things that you can do, again, before you get on. So let's say you've got a 2-year-old horse. This page is full of things that you can do with your youngsters. Now, you can go along to the young horse one and see all these lessons in particular. It's very important. A lot of these things are really important. It's very important that your horse can pick up its feet. It's very important that your young horse, even if it's just educationally young, can be handled all over. It's terribly important that you can pick up its feet. It's terribly important that the horse ties up. Tying up, is a big problem with some people, with some horses. And it's really very important that your horse knows that. Now, I want to just show you something else about tying up. So let's just come back here. Now, when we've got the young horse and we're teaching these things, all these different things we can teach, I think that we get a really good idea of the horse's emotional level if we can do these things without actually having to tie the horse up. So while it is important the horse knows how to tie up, I think when you're teaching things like the first saddling, I think it's very important that the horse will stand for this sort of thing. Now, you can see this young horse here. He's 5, I think. Yes, 5. He might be 6 now because it was the horse's birthday a few days ago. He hasn't been ridden yet. He's in the process of being started. But you can see he's relaxed. He's not tied up, because what I want him to do is I want him to feel that he can leave if he wants to. But I know this. I know that if he's in my bubble of communication, if he's in the engagement zone, he'll stand there and be attentive while I saddle him up, even for the first time. So, and this is the first time he was saddled. So I know then if he walks off or runs off, I've got it wrong. The horse is either not ready or is too emotional for this lesson. So I've got it wrong. If he was tied up, I wouldn't know that. If he starts to graze and wanders off, then I know, again, I've got it wrong. The horse isn't in my bubble of communication. And so he's just left. I'm not interesting enough. The lesson isn't engaging enough. Again, I've just got it wrong. So it's a good indicator for us. By not tying the horse up, by not restricting its movement, we can see if we're getting the lesson right or not. And here you can see the horse is standing there. It's quite quietly, but he is attentive. His ears are back. He's sort of, listening to me. His ears are listening to me. And these are the sorts of things that are really useful. So if my horse will stand like this to be saddled, I know he's got that as a solid lesson and I can move on to something else. So here we're actually going to do a saddle habituation lesson with this horse. So I'm actually tying the stirrups together with a bungee rope. That's what that's showing there. And then I'm going to get a lariat and put the lariat through the stirrup. So what I want to do is habituate the horse to that feeling of the stirrups flapping around a bit, because I don't know about you, but my legs aren't completely still when I ride. So I do like the horse to be habituated to having that feeling of a bit of flapping about. It's me flapping about when I'm riding. So this is a really good way of doing that. I've got a lunge rein on the horse's bridle, and I'm just going to put this stirrup through there. And then, whoops, that's a photograph from before. I'm somehow out of order. Here I go. Now I'm going to ask him to move around me to the left with the lunge rein on his bridle and the lariat on his stirrup. And if he's happy to stand while I flap the stirrup around, then that's great. Again, that's telling me that I'm getting this right. The horse is only going to move when he's not asked to move if he's uncomfortable. If he's comfortable, he'll happily stand. And so I'm flicking the stirrup up and down, he's standing, and we're all fine. So I can actually increase the emotional level by asking him to move. So we don't always want him, with a low emotional level. We might need to raise it a bit, raise his emotional level a bit, and I can do that by getting him to move. So there he is in trot, and here he is in trot 2. Now, the other advantage of this little lesson is that I can move those stirrups left and right, back and forward, up and down. And I can also put a bit of pressure on it as well. So I can pull on that a bit, which will put a bit of pressure on the other side of the saddle, which will give the horse a bit of a feeling of what it's going to be like when I do ride. And this takes me quickly into the long reining that we were talking about a minute ago. Now the horse, is all set up to long rein. And here you can see he's really relaxed. He's just walking. The lesson is progressing really well. He's not going any faster than he's been asked to. And here we've picked him up a little bit and we're asking for a bit of give to the bit. And this is a nice photo because you can see the horse's frame. And this is really what I'm looking for. This is a really good frame. He's building up top line here. I can work this horse in this frame. I'm really happy to ride him in this frame as well. So horses repeat what they practice. And I don't think it makes a great deal of difference whether you're riding him or whether you're on the ground. I want him practicing this posture. This is the posture I like. This is the posture I'm after when I do ride. And so that's what I want him to practice. And because that is going to build the muscles he should have when I'm riding. So whether or not you're already riding your horse, come back to long reining and just check that you're training the posture that you want when you're riding. So here we get the same horse at the mounting block. And this is just, again, you can see from the horse by his head elevation how nervous he is. So if he's getting a bit anxious, his head will go up. Now he's a Frisian, so he has sort of naturally quite elevated shoulders and quite a high head carriage. But here, if his head were 4 inches lower or 3 inches lower, I would be happier with that. And only you know your horse. You know your horse's natural posture. But do be aware of that because it's the quickest way to get an idea of where your horse is emotionally. So I encourage you to go and do that first engagement zone lesson and just get an idea of how to judge your particular horse's emotional level. And be aware of that all the time when you're training. So what should happen if you're teaching something new is the horse's emotional level should increase a bit because it's like being in a classroom, and if the teacher's terribly boring and you're not therefore engaged with learning, your emotional level stays the same. If you get a teacher that's great, comes in with a really good story or something, your emotional level goes up a bit and you become engaged with learning. If you get a teacher that comes in and only speaks Japanese in a lesson and you don't speak any Japanese and they scream and yell, then your emotional level goes way up through the roof and you're nervous and you're not learning. We want that nice storytelling teacher that's engaging, and that's what we want to be when we're training our horse. And I would say this picture here shows you that he's emotional, but he's not so emotional that he's leaving, but he's more emotional than he was when he was standing. I'll just try and find you the photo of him standing being tacked up. There. You see he's 4 inches lower, at least 4 inches lower when he's being tacked up with his head elevation than he is with this mounting lesson. And so that's really interesting, and that's well worth knowing, because if he gets more emotional than that, he's likely to take a step. Or, if he gets a lot more emotional than that, he's likely to take a lot of steps. So here again, we can see a slight difference in his head elevation here. Yeah, it goes up only about an inch, but it does go up when I lean over him. Now we can't see his head there at all. But this is a great way of breaking down that first mounting for you. If your horse is comfortable here, great. That's a great start. Here I've got both my feet off the mounting block. I've got all my weight on the horse. The horse is still comfortable. The horse hasn't left. Here I've got all my weight on the horse and I'm high. So there are two things that the horse has to deal with. And this final one, I still haven't swung my leg over, but the horse, I have asked the horse to take a couple of steps away from the mounting block. So he has now carried me for a couple of steps, but I haven't swung my leg over. Of course, as soon as you do swing your leg over, you're in a completely different situation. So you want to make sure before you do that, because I can slide off very easily here and I won't be hurt. Once I'm astride the horse, it's a whole different kettle of fish. So we'll come back here. And sorry, I'm just going to look for comments. Good. Sorry, I'm just going to read your comments now because I have so many screens working here that it's a bit hard for me to follow. I should have a number of different computer screens set up in my car. That would be good. Yeah. Now Dale says about the different ages. I'm going to put a link in the comments for you here, and that's to the Deb Bennett article that I was reading from in the beginning. So I think it's well worth a read. It's a very good article. She's the expert in the field, and I really do recommend that you read that. And Kelly says the educational age. Yeah, it is so important. You know, I've met educationally young horses that are 16 years old, and they still can't be expected to behave or learn in the same way as a 3-year-old uneducated horse. They might be much more capable physically, but emotionally they're still back there. They can't concentrate for that long. So it's probably I'll just do, Dale, your question about the surcingle. Would I use the surcingle before a saddle? Absolutely. You know, the thing about the surcingle is it's a much smaller piece of equipment. So getting a surcingle on a horse is much easier than getting a saddle on a horse. If you look at the first saddling lesson, actually the first thing I use is a rope, a nice soft rope, and I habituate the horse to having that feeling of having a girth around its middle, which is very important. And I get the horse to move with me with that rope girth. And then I go to a surcingle. And it's important that, you know, you don't make a mistake with that. You know, so it's very important when you first put the surcingle on, not only is your horse ready for it, but that you do it up tight enough so that if you've got it wrong, that it won't slip backwards and really cause an accident. And B, it's very important that your horse is really, for me, wearing a bridle, because I want to attach a long line to the bridle, because when I do let the horse go the first time it's wearing that surcingle, I want to be able to keep it off the fence. So if I'm in a round pen, I want to be able to keep it away from the fence, because some horses will kick at it anyway. No matter how much habituation work you do, some of them will have a kick at it. And the last thing I want is for that horse to kick its leg against the fence, because then it could potentially get very hurt. But, you know, it is going to hurt if the horse does that. Now, if the horse gets hurt, that's another deal breaker, isn't it? It really is a complete deal breaker. And it doesn't really matter if I go up to the horse and hit it over the head with a 2x4, or the horse kicks up when I first put a saddle on it and it hurts its leg on the round pen fence. It doesn't make any difference to the horse. It was still hurt while I was training it. So I'm still responsible for that. And it's still going to put the horse off me and off training. So it's very, very important that the horse doesn't get hurt. I've seen, you know, horses that have just had a saddle thrown on them and, you know, been let go. I think I've talked about one of those horses in a previous webinar that, you know, I bought knowing it bucked, and it really did buck. Apparently it could buck off a girthed up saddle. And and it did buck like a lunatic, and I found that it had 2 torn muscles right down its back underneath the saddle. It's not fair. It's not fair to a horse to try and do that. And this horse probably got that damage from having the saddle on and being let go. Because if you've seen horses, and there is one at the very beginning of my first saddling lesson, the very beginning of that DVD there's a horse, that horse actually, the one I was just talking about. I'm just going to find it for you. And they do damage themselves when they do these bucking things. And you'll see here, let me find that, because it's actually, I'm pretty sure it's in here. It is. It's at the beginning of this first saddling lesson. I'll see if I can just, here we are. This is the horse. Now, I knew it bucked when I bought it, and I sort of rather arrogantly thought, oh, never mind, I'll just restart it, it'll be fine. And it was started as a 2.5-year-old. Big mistake. This is the first time I'd put a saddle on it. And I think the fact that it was started as a 2.5-year-old is, probably why it behaved like this. The person that owned it actually has done tons of work with me since and never sent another horse out for starting. She started all her own. She sent one more out for starting and had much the same result. But, this is wrong. This is awful. And you can see as well, this is exactly when I stopped allowing a horse to go free when I first put a saddle or a surcingle on it, because this is really dangerous and I can't stop that horse bucking because I'm not attached to the horse at all. So after this, I said, right, okay, this is way too dangerous, because that horse could easily have put its leg through the fence or done anything. Yeah. So anyway, that's it really is well worth going through that first saddling course, because you'll find a lot of really useful stuff. Even if your horse is under saddle and going well, there's a lot of saddle habituation things and things that will be very useful for any horse that is even, a little bit iffy about the saddle or just not 100% sure about that. There's a lot of great habituation stuff. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to show you for when you're starting your horse. Now I've got to change screens again. I'll be good at this by the end. Okay, so if we go over to the second page of the training, these things are really fun. The habituation to novel objects, I call it the recycling lesson, where we end up sort of getting all the recycling on the horse and then having the horse long rein. This one is a thoroughbred, and he was really nervous about dangly things and things that made noise. Let's see if we can speed him up a little bit. Anyway, it shows you how to do it, and then at the end of the lesson, how your horse should be traveling on the long reins, in frame, soft in the bridle, concentrating, not scared, all of that stuff before you jump on. So for any educationally young horse, that's a great lesson. There's tons of videos in there to make sure that you can do it without frightening the horse. So do it and keep the horse nice and safe. Of course, you can do round pen work. Now, the round pen is great, but again, you have to be really careful in the round pen because it's very easy to chase the horse, and it's very important that you don't chase the horse. So do use the round pen with care, and do watch this what not to do video first. Very important, what not to do in the round pen. And all these other things, of course, trailer loading, but the stopping and the stop and back up are really important lessons that your horse should know before you get on. And of course, the stopping you can do quite early on, because when you're teaching all the other groundwork, such as your give to the bit and the shoulder work, you have to keep changing sides a lot. So you want to be going around to the left, then you're going to ask the horse to stop, and then you're going to change sides and try the right. And if you teach stop at the same time properly, rather than just dragging the horse to a stop, you then have the benefit of your horse that also knows how to stop beautifully off your voice before you ever get on. And I think that is setting you and the horse up for success, by having as much knowledge in that horse as you possibly can before you put your foot in that stirrup and swing your leg over. So I am going back to the questions, and I don't think we have any more. So that's it from me for today. Thank you very much for coming. And I will see you every weekday this week at 2 for Facebook Live. Otherwise, I will see you next Monday, same time, same place, hopefully not in the car, hopefully with a little less wind. Thank you. Bye.